Oh, welcome in to the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter. And hey, we got news and notes around the SEC that some of these we weren't able to get to on the last episode. Just enough content to have a terrific show. Missouri finally picked up their quarterback that they've been searching for in the transfer portal. The Ole Miss Tennessee rivalry's heating up. Arkansas lands them receivers, something Sam Pittman's been talking about for weeks. The Razorbacks trying to add to that room. Auburn getting help in the defensive backfield. But hey, we've got one of our first broadcast games. Information on that. Very exciting stuff. Talk about 100-day countdown. It's right around the corner. But first, man, I got to hand it to you. FanDuel. Again, not a sponsor of the show, although we're open to you, FanDuel. But we got to credit these guys for continuing to pump out these point spreads because they're giving us something to talk about here in mid-May, and I do appreciate it. We, over the last week, if you missed it, go back. They've opened a number of the Game of the Year lines in the SEC, and they've come out with several more interesting lines. So let's just start right there. Bunch of rivalry games here listed among the point spreads listed by FanDuel. I'm going to list every single one we got. Got into it a little bit on Twitter. If you saw it, Missouri fan was upset not posting the Missouri lines. FanDuel's not posting them. But as soon as they do, hey, we'll give you each and every point spread that a legitimate sportsbook is going to throw out there. And these are the ones we got, starting with the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, Georgia, the defending national champions, favored by 17 over Billy Napier's Florida Gators team. So, hey, that's an interesting one. Of course, no surprise the spread is that large, considering all the talent they got there in Athens. To me, that's a stay away at this point in time. But how about this one? This is one of the better emerging rivalries in the SEC, whether one side wants to admit it or not. Kentucky at Tennessee, the Vols favored by 3.5 on Rocky Top. That should be one hell of a game. I might even favor Kentucky with the 3.5 because this is going to be another coin toss type game. Now, how about this one? Both sides laughing at this one. Tennessee at Georgia, late in the season, Bulldogs favored by 17.5. Tennessee haters, like I said, laughing at that. Tennessee fans that I saw, they were hammering this line courtesy of FanDuel. So again, Tennessee underdogs by 17.5 on the road against the defending national champions. How about this? You can't argue with this line, but it is unusual to see it in this rivalry. Alabama on the road at LSU in Death Valley. The Crimson Tide favored by 16 points. Brian Kelly, that's your number one job there in Baton Rouge. Close that gap. Coach O did it that one year. Of course, they went on to win the national championship. You ain't going to reach the college football playoff and, of course, the SEC championship game if you're LSU until you can knock off the Crimson Tide. And a 16-point spread here, courtesy of FanDuel, gives you an indication of where those teams are at. How about this? This is not an annual showcase game, but should be one hell of a game this fall. Florida at Texas A&M. The Aggies pulled a big upset there during the COVID season. 9-point favorites at home over the Florida Gators, according to FanDuel. So that's an interesting one. 9 points. That might be one worth betting on. How about this? It ain't often. You got to remember, when Sam Pittman got the job there in Fayetteville, Arkansas was not favored till last season. I can't remember which game. Maybe the Auburn game. That may have been the first time that Arkansas was favored in an SEC game. You're favored over LSU. LSU at Arkansas. Arkansas favored by 2.5 points over them LSU Tigers in Fayetteville. So that the Golden Boot, that's a hell of a matchup there. Arkansas snapped that streak. Can they do it 2 years in a row. Right now, you're the current favorite by just under a field goal. What could be the game of the year in the SEC East? I know we already talked Florida, Georgia, Georgia, Tennessee. Many think those will be games of the year in the SEC East, but Georgia at Kentucky, the Bulldogs favored by 16 points in Lexington late in the season. Ooh, buddy. That might be one worth jumping on right there. So, based on these point spreads, Georgia's getting about in as much respect as Alabama, which I guess we shouldn't be surprised. And Bulldogs been pretty damn good here lately, but just something to think about. The Egg Bowl's on here too. Mississippi State at Ole Miss. The Rebels favored by a touchdown in Oxford. Mississippi State's dropped the last 2 Egg Bowls, so this has got to be one that Mike Leach and company have got to get. 7-point margin, pretty large margin. I think I had Jake Wimberly on a couple weeks ago. Asked him his projected point spread for this one. I think he said 6 or 7 points, so that's right on the money. Jake, I'm telling you, that guy knows what he's talking about. How about this one? Florida at Florida State. This will bring a smile to them Gators' face because they're favored by 6 in Tallahassee, where them Seminoles, they can't get them a win against the Gators. So Billy Napier may be in year 1. Mike Norvell, what are you in, 4 or 5 there? Still not favored at home in the most important game in that program's annual series. So not looking good for old Mike Norvell there. How about this one? LSU at Texas A&M. Another one of these rivalries that's becoming one of the best in the SEC. Aggies favored by 9.5 points over them LSU Tigers. That's another interesting one. LSU, a lot of underdogs here for LSU. And how about the Iron Bowl? You may have to cover your ears here, Auburn fans, because this one's rough. Now, hell, they basically said the same thing last year. Almost put off the upset. But Auburn at Alabama. Crimson Tide, of course, favored by 26 points. Ooh. Man, if Brian Harsin loses this game by 4 touchdowns, that may be all she wrote. So, hey, we'll see what happens, but that's a monumental point spread here for the offseason. And then we got 2 more non-conference games, but annual showcase games for the SEC versus the ACC. Georgia Tech at Georgia. Bulldogs favored by 28 points. No surprise there. South Carolina at Clemson. Clemson favored by 17.5. Is this the year the Gamecocks snapped that streak? I think Shane and I both predicted it to be last year, but we're not going to talk about that because it's going to be this year with Spencer Rattler and Shane Beamer in year 2 there in Columbia. So there you have it, some new lines from FanDuel. We'll keep bringing you these lines as they come and go, but, like I always like to do, maybe look at these and pick, the best value for all these lines is right now before we know what each team's got and, having a better read on these teams than Vegas does. To me, the one that really jumps out, Georgia, favored by 16 at Kentucky. Not saying, again, Bulldogs are going to kill me. They think I hate their squad. Not saying you're going to lose that game, but favored by 16 to what could be a red-hot Kentucky team. That's probably the one I'm putting all my chips on right there, Kentucky. And the points, 16, that's a ton of points. Maybe even, it's like I'm trying to buy some goodwill with Big Blue. Kentucky at Tennessee, I like that one too. Kentucky getting 3.5 on the road. Again, not saying they're going to win that game in Neyland Stadium. They did last time. Not saying that's going to happen, but I'll take the 3.5. That's one that's got my attention. And how about this? Texas A&M at home against Florida, only favored by 9. I usually don't like to take a lot of, the high spreads this early in the season, but I kind of like that one for the Aggies. I think that's going to be a tough one for the Florida Gators, going on the road to College Station, not a place they're very familiar with. And, of course, last time they dropped a big one there. So those 3, be on the lookout. Go on your FanDuel app. Of course, I wish you could tell them we sent you. But, hey, they're not a sponsor. Not yet, anyway. But all right, hey, moving on. I got a little bit of, we always try to make the show bigger and better, as I hope you guys can tell. And I've got to be honest with you guys, with the 100-day countdown right around the corner, trying out some new things, got new intros for all 14 SEC teams. We're going to try to do something completely different. This is going to help on the YouTube, is going to help the audio version of the show. So I'm trying to help both at the same time. So let's kick it down to Tuscaloosa with our first new intro. And like I said, we got them for all 14 SEC teams. But the reason I wanted to start here with Alabama, because they're the ones that we have got officially scheduled here, week 2 of the season, traveling to Austin, Texas to take on them Longhorns. And Fox has announced they've selected this game, Alabama at Texas, September 10th. Now, they haven't officially announced the kickoff time, but I'll go ahead and tell you now. I've been told this is going to be rough for a lot of you on the East Coast. 11 o'clock Central, noon Eastern time. This is Fox's big thing they do now, the big noon kickoff. For some damn reason, they put their marquee game there right at noon. I think really the reason is just trying to take attention away from ESPN and CBS, who, of course, has the 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central. They don't want to go up against that monster game. They don't want to go up against the SEC at night. So Fox takes that noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central kickoff, and that's what they're going to do for Alabama at Texas. So this is going to be one hell of a game. Again, this is the one I circled on my calendar here for week 2 of the SEC Dream scenario. I really think Texas is going to throw everything they have at Alabama. Again, I'm not dumb enough to say Texas is going to threaten Alabama, but I don't know. It could be an interesting game. And just a little inside baseball for the audience. When it comes to games like this that are non-conference, the way I understand it, these networks hold what is essentially kind of like Shane and I did on the last one. They hold a fantasy-style draft, and they get to pick their marquee games that they really want to cover. And now, of course, this, Fox can't grab the Iron Bowl or anything because CBS, ESPN have the rights to the SEC. But when it's a non-conference showdown like this, it's kind of up for grabs. And to my understanding, the number 1 selection, Fox had the top overall pick, and they selected Alabama at Texas. So that's why Alabama will be playing on Fox. A rare gift to Fox to get to cover the Crimson Tide. So this is pretty big deal. This is going to be a marquee event for Fox Sports. This is going to be a marquee event for Texas. And it'll be another opponent that Alabama rips through early in the season. No doubt about it. But just wanted to make that note. But next, we got some news down in Mizzou. So let's kick it on down to Columbia. With them Tigers, hey, they finally landed their transfer quarterback, and it's a familiar name here in the SEC, or hell, if you're just from the state of Mississippi, because they got Jack Abram, former Mississippi State quarterback. This was a guy that was battling it out with Will Rogers, not this spring, but previously. I don't think he really ever factored in much. There was never a threat that Will Rogers was not really going to be the guy. And as I understand, Abraham, he kind of left the team kind of mid-season. I don't know the details. I've tried to check on it. I've heard, injury related. I don't know, but just an interesting scenario down there. But this is a quality passer here for the Missouri Tigers. But to give you an idea of, you shouldn't make this out. I did see someone say, well, hell, Jack Abrams got to be, the guy from Missouri now, the most likely candidate to start. And I'm pumping the brakes on that because he's going to be a walk-on to start his career at Missouri. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to start for you, but look at the path. If you're not familiar with this guy, of what he's taken. He started out Louisiana Tech, Northwest Mississippi was next. Southern Miss was after that. Mississippi State, and now Missouri. So he's kind of been all over, really, the state of Mississippi. How about this? He was a high school teammate of DK Metcalf, of course, former Ole Miss Rebel and now a Seattle Seahawk, at least for now, with Russell Wilson gone. But he has thrown, Abram, for over 7,000 yards, 41 touchdowns, 27 interceptions, but he's been very accurate. Completed 69% of his passes during his 3 seasons at Southern Miss. So, again, at the end of the day, I try to keep it honest with you guys. If Missouri starts this Jack Abram, I think that's a total indictment of the quarterbacks they got on their roster, to be honest with you, that just went through spring competing for the job. So I'm not writing this guy off completely. A nice little, experienced, potentially backup. Hell, maybe he will be your starter. I could be dead wrong. But, at least you're adding something to the quarterback room. And I think, if nothing else, I didn't even realize this was an option, but the incoming true freshman Sam Horn, the Elite 11 quarterback, apparently he's a touted Major League Baseball prospect. And if he gets drafted high enough, there is some level of concern that he could just go to play baseball. So I think this is Drinkowitz and company covering themselves in the event that happens. Got to have another passer on the roster. Can't just go with 2 quarterbacks. So, that's just something to think about. And maybe that's why maybe that's why he's a walk-on. If Sam Horn leaves, that clears up a roster spot. Certainly you don't want to be giving away your prize recruit's spot away, but something to consider there. But that wasn't the only pickup either from Missouri. They landed former Baylor defensive lineman Josh Landry, who was a former 4-star recruit out of Houston, Texas. And during his 3 seasons there at Baylor, just 12 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, and 2 sacks. He has 2 years of eligibility, counting the extra year there with the COVID year. So Josh Landry is a Mizzou Tiger. Couple of additions to Drinkowitz's roster there. Next, let's kick it on down to Oxford. And it's interesting. If you missed it, a couple weeks back, had Adam Sparks, the Knoxville News Sentinel, on the show, and he talked about this budding rivalry with Ole Miss and Tennessee. So, it's very unlikely that when we go to the pod system that Ole Miss and Tennessee are going to be in the same pod, although that would, as long as Kiffin and Heupel are in Knoxville and Oxford, respectively, this would be a hell of a matchup to watch every season. But man, this rivalry is heating up, and it's thanks in part the latest little spark here. Former Central Florida receiver, former Josh Heupel receiver, Jalen Robinson committed to Ole Miss over Tennessee. Uh-oh. No doubt, Lane Kiffin remains the portal king here in the SEC. Robinson had 73 catches, 1,300 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns in 2 seasons at Central Florida. Began his career at Oklahoma, and he's a Texas native. So, maybe this, in part, a little bit want to be closer to home, but they run a very similar offense in Oxford that they do in Knoxville. So I don't necessarily think that was, I don't think he's picking one offense over another, but I think it's a big pickup for Ole Miss. I think Jalen Robinson poised to really help this offense with the guys that they lost to the NFL this offseason on the outside of that offense. So, hey, I think it's a loss for Tennessee. Big pickup for Ole Miss. But speaking of Tennessee, let's kick it on down to Rocky Top real quick. Where on Monday, a little bit of news here with the football team, but not for the upcoming season. I don't want to confuse anybody. This is for the 2023 season opener. Tennessee was scheduled to play at BYU as returning the home and home from a couple of years ago when BYU hit the Hail Mary there, and I believe that game went in overtime. BYU, of course, pulled it out. Well, apparently the return game is off, and Tennessee is going to play Virginia in Nashville to open the 2023 season. in Nissan Stadium where the Tennessee Titans play. So pretty interesting. I think the reason behind this, BYU, if you don't know, they're jumping to the Big 12. They're already scheduled to play Arkansas, well, next season as well as 2023. So I don't think BYU wanted any part after playing a soft schedule for decades to play two SEC teams on top of a Big 12 schedule. So that's your reason for flexing out of that. Virginia, a quality ACC opponent. And as I joked on Twitter, have no idea who their quarterback will be in 2023, but I am sure he will be one hell of a player. Probably his debut Heisman campaign here against them Vols. That just seems to be the way it goes for for the Tennessee Vols. So congratulations, Virginia fans. You have got you a star quarterback in the making, and I don't even know who the hell he is, but it's a damn near lock. All right, next let's kick it on down to Fayetteville. Where Arkansas, like I said, they finally got their receiver they've been hunting for in the transfer portal. And it's a guy that some SEC fans will know because former Georgia Bulldog who transferred to Toledo for 1 year, back in the SEC, Matt Landers, a really touted guy that, every year he was in Athens, I was hearing buzz about Matt Landers, big time target here. Another, I think he's like 6'5". The Arkansas Razorbacks, they love them some tall receivers. Landers had 32 catches, 646 yards, 6 touchdowns in 14 career games. Some of that action came with Georgia. Some of it came against Toledo. But, if I'm being honest, I don't think he's necessarily a game breaker by any means. Like, he's not going to come into the SEC and catch the world on fire. But, I think for the point in time we are in the transfer portal, this is about as good as you could do if you're Arkansas, because this is a guy with massive potential that, he may give you nothing, or he may emerge as one of your better deep ball targets here for Arkansas, where they need a receiver or two to step up this season. So, not a bad pickup by any means. I'm not trying to trash him at all. Again, he's got some decent stats here, but, it just seemed like every offseason we were hearing buzz about him in Athens. He was going to have his breakout season. I even went back and watched his first appearance there. It was in 2019, Georgia versus Vanderbilt, and the announcer crew said, and this is a direct quote, Jake Fromm said Matt Landers is going to tear up the SEC. So they clearly liked what they had in him in Athens. I have no idea why it didn't really pan out for him. I think he got injured once or twice. I'm pretty sure on that one, but definitely wasn't injured last season with Toledo. So you may be getting, a little bit of a surprise here if you're the Arkansas Razorbacks, but I would just set expectations low. Maybe you get something great in here in Matt Landers because, that could be the final piece of the puzzle to having a really special season there in Fayetteville. Now, last item to hit on, let's jump on down to the Plains real quick. For them Tigers, they have landed via the transfer portal former Iowa State defensive back Craig McDonald. He was a freshman last season, played in all 13 games for the Cyclones with 3 starts, 41 tackles, 2 interceptions. He had 10 tackles and an interception against Oklahoma. So this Craig McDonald, he got up for the big game. He's got 3 seasons of eligibility remaining. And, potentially 4, I think, with the COVID year because he was a redshirt freshman last season. So, hey, Auburn needs some help there in the defensive backfield, getting it with Craig McDonald. It seems like every standout Iowa State defender, once he leaves, comes to the SEC. So, I have no idea what Iowa State's depth chart looks like, but it can't look good because half their, like I said, all their best players leave for the SEC. And Craig McDonald, welcome to the SEC because you're the latest. But all right, hey, that's all we got on this episode of the show. Shane, scheduled to be back on the next episode. We got a bunch of questions racked up I'm going to hit Cousin Shane with. And, that should be a fun episode because we're going to go all over the place with some of these questions that you guys have lined up for us. But, hey, that's going to do it for this episode of the show. I appreciate each and every one of you. And, hey, give us feedback on those intros if you like them. If they suck, maybe we'll just totally ditch them. But I have a feeling you guys are going to love it. But that's going to do it for this episode of the show. We'll catch you on the next one.